episode 16 of Breaking News Bears. I am your host for today, Mayor Russo, joined by Evan Davis and Mateo Ruiz as always. And I'm going to apologize in advance. The voice is not too much up to speed. Been at Leaf Square a couple times, and yeah, last night was it was one to say it was a night. It was a night, and it's still living in my head rent free. But to take the mind off it, we're going to be talking some baseball and a lot of good baseball teams at that. Why not kick it off with one that many would argue is the best one right now? I'll turn the question over to you in a little bit, but we're going to start with the league's favorite team now, and Evans most definitely not, the Houston Astros. This team has been on a red hot tear as of late. They are, I believe, on a 10-game win streak, giving up just 11 runs over said win streak with 5 shutouts. The pitching has been there. Alvarez has been leading the way all season long, and most evidently over the stretch with 10 homers. Pena leading all rookies in RBIs at 20. And the pitching, like I mentioned before, they have played an eminent role in the Astros' success. Verlander, if you guys do not know, and Mateo, you were quite high on him heading into the season and early parts of the season, but he almost threw a no-hitter a couple nights ago. It got broken up, unfortunately, but it shows you that at that age and at where he's at in his career, following a Tommy John surgery, he's there and he is ready to throw, and he's looking to win it all. And that was a performance that shows just how much he has not improved, but just hasn't left, right? So Justin Verlander's on the right track, and the offense is starting to get on the right track as well, hitting them to the train tracks. The homers have been up for the Houston Astros. Guys like Tucker and Altuve, guys who have been struggling out of the gates, they're now getting and hovering a little bit around a decent batting average, 250, 260, slowly inching their way closer to what sort of we expect to see from them all throughout the year. But I'm going to pose the question to you guys straight up. Mateo, I'll go with you. Is this the best team in baseball right now?
Are the Houston Astros the best team in baseball right now? I think they're up there. I think they're definitely in that conversation, and I think it's definitely time to start talking about them. Beginning of the season, we had a lot of success from teams like the Yankees and teams like the Angels, and those sort of went to the front of our radar, and we kind of forgot about the Astros a little bit. Not for any good reason, just probably because we were tired about talking of them, because the Astros have been good since they've been back in the playoffs. And they're right here again. They're actually atop the division now, which I just checked and surprised me a little bit. They're half a game up on the Angels, and they're winning the games that they have to win. They're 10-8 against teams above 500, which is pretty good this early in the season. But it's not anything like crazy. It's not like they're world beaters right now. It's not like they're going out and they're beating up on every team. They're doing what they have to do. They're winning against teams that they should be beating. They're beating the bad teams in baseball, and that's what the Astros have done over the course of their dynasty. They've gone in, they've done their job, and they've taken care of teams that needed to be taken care of. And if that's their formula to success, and the Astros are back there, then they're back in that successful area of where the Houston Astros want to be. And this year they're doing it a little differently. They have Verlander back, obviously, and their pitching is probably better than it's ever been in the past. But especially the production you're getting from your top 3 guys. But this Astros team is a legitimate contender, and nobody's talking about them because of the Angels in their division, but it's time they start getting their respect.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a total different situation, different scenario from right out of the gates at the beginning of the year to now. Like, they were losing games against the divisional rivals, Angels, which I would argue has sort of kickstarted the Angels season. And then you go look at the other teams, like the Diamondbacks dropping a couple to them. I'm looking at the Mariners too, a couple there. Teams that you should beat and teams that are in your division. Now they're taking care of business. It's what you expect to see from the Astros finally. Evan, I'm going to turn this one over to you. Now, I know how much of the Astros you hate. It's always, I think we was discussing in our group chat earlier when I proposed, let's talk about the hottest team in baseball right now. And you said, absolutely not. They are words I cannot say on a broadcast. But I'm going to turn it over to you right now. As of May 13th, Friday the 13th, is this the best team in baseball right now?
I think I'm going to agree with Mateo that it's definitely up there. They definitely be in the top 5 for me. I'm looking, as we're going to talk about later, I'm looking at the Yankees, who have been really hot over this past couple of weeks. I mean, I'm looking at my guys, the Dodgers, as another team, 20-10, nothing to sniff at there. I mean, there's still there's teams that are heating up at the beginning of the season. I wouldn't say the Astros are the best at the top of the mountain, but I think if there was like a Mount Rushmore, they would definitely be one of the 4 that I would look at. But I just remember, at the beginning of the year, they didn't start off too hot. It seemed like them and the Braves kind of had a hangover from October, both going to the World Series. But Now they're starting to pick it up again. The Angels were leading that division for quite some time. And now with the Astros constantly winning and with the Angels kind of still staying afloat at the top of the division, only half a game back. So, one win, one loss flip flops that. But when you look at five shutouts over these 10 games and also only giving up 11 runs, I mean, I'm no mathematician there, but you're giving up damn near close to only one run per game, which in baseball is just crazy considering the amount of talent that is in the MLB. And it's not like the Astros are playing crappy teams. Like they're getting wins against the teams that they should be getting wins against, but also teams that are, like, as we said before, above 500. And I think the way that Justin Verlander's been pitching, I was skeptical of the deal at first, giving 2 years, and I think it was like 25 million a year to a guy that's coming off of Tommy John. I mean, that's definitely a gamble, but I mean, they hit on that so far. But then again, the season's very long, and I don't wish upon anyone, but Verlander's up there in age and durability. I'm curious to see how they handle him, especially since they want as much as they could get from him in the postseason, if they get there, and they probably will at this rate. But I'm just curious to see how they handle Verlander, if it means like maybe scratching a start here or there, just kind of getting a feeling out process, because Tommy John is the most serious injury you could have as a pitcher. So kind of curious to see what they do there.
Yeah, and I mean, curiosity is kind of what paves the voyage towards the great seasons and seasons that are about to unfold, all that kind of stuff. I'm curious to know this part. Now, the Astros, they've been a good team for the last 4 to 5 years at least. They have had a core group. Now, some pieces have left, Carlos Correa to name one, but they're not always the same as they were. And there's always going to be changing parts here and there. There's still this one thing that the Houston Astros always throw, whether it was their highs or their lows, they've always maintained the ability that they want to win. They have that winning culture. They've established it with a World Series victory. That's going to do wonders to a franchise, and it has done wonders to this franchise. I want to ask you guys this, Mateo. I'll turn it to you right now. Are you worried about the sustainability of the offense and the pitching, two things that over this red hot streak have been at the peak of what you're expecting to see in an MLB season? Are you worried about that being sustainable, or do the 4 to 5 years of history, the winning culture of this team sort of say, yeah, once it's turned on, once this switch, when everything is clicking, once it's on, it's going to be very tough for it to slow down and go off? Like, where's your mind at when you're looking at these two things and where they're going to land within the Junes, the Julys, when the baseball gets more meaningful and the games get more tougher?
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about the pitching. I alluded to sort of the top three guys on the Astros staff right now. I'm looking at the numbers here. They have three pitchers that are qualified in terms of the amount of innings that they've pitched compared to the amount of games the Astros played. It's basically like their sample size is large enough to actually make a judgment on it. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but both Verlander and Luis Garcia, their 1 and 2 starters, have a sub-1 whip, meaning they're letting less than one runner get on base. Yeah, Evan, they're letting less than one runner get on base an inning. Verlander's at 0.64 now. Now, I don't have Verlander's career numbers in front of me, but I can tell you that over the course of a season is not what you're going to get from even prime Justin Verlander. So it looks like these numbers are definitely going to come back down to earth, especially from the pitching side, just in terms of like the amount of base runners that you're giving up, because they've been absolutely incredible and borderline unhittable this year. But just because they're coming down to earth doesn't mean that they're going to be bad pitchers. I mean, you have so much room to drop from, the 155 ERA that Verlander has, or the 294 that Garcia has, or even we're looking at Framber Valdez. He's in there with 334. All three of those guys are, statistically wise, having some of the best seasons in the American League in terms of starting pitchers right now. And they're all on the same team, and they're all going to hit you 3 days in a row. Like you don't want to play this team. So yeah, they don't even necessarily have to keep this level of success up, or this level of, the success that they're having on the mound right now. They just need to, be themselves, and they'll be a scary team to go up against in the playoffs when you have to play these three back to back to back.
Yeah, I mean, listen, baseball is one of the hardest sports to get a gauge on everything. We're like almost 2 months into a season, and we cannot give an accurate statement as to, is this team going to be a powerhouse team throughout the entire regular season? In like hockey, for example, which we were talking about earlier today, 2 months in, the teams that kind of have it and kind of don't, and where they're going to fall in the standings. Baseball, that's what makes it so interesting, so difficult to break it down, is because you don't know. It's changing week to week. Last week, we were talking about, or maybe 2 weeks rather, we were talking about the New York teams where they've been red hot and they've stayed around there, but it's always a new team that's approaching. Later, we're going to be talking about the Arizona Diamondbacks, which I didn't expect to be talking about at all in mid-May, but here we are. That's what baseball is. It's such a funny sport, and that's how it works. And Evan, I'm going to ask you this one question here, because you were very adamant on Carlos Correa and his departure from the Astros and now landing in Minnesota. They're without Carlos Correa now, and 30 plus games in. I don't know. Do your expectations change at all with the Carlos Correa-esque, or rather without Carlos Correa, Houston Astros? Like, where do your expectations lie?
Well, I mean, it's hard because Carlos Correa is also a huge part, and then I also was going to say Mateo. I did some research, and Justin Verlander's career WHIP is 1.13,
Yeah,
which is still
exactly.
like, I mean, that's incredible.
It's incredible, but 0.64 this year is like
Yeah,
unheard of for him or for
no, it's
anybody.
especially yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, just for how long he's been in the MLB,
Mhm.
to have a 1.13 is great. But I mean, I think it just the Astros, they're always going to have high expectations, just given the talent that still surrounds them. Like, you still have Jose Altuve, you still have Yordan Alvarez, you still have Kyle Tucker, you have Michael Brantley, you have Alex Bregman, who's a Yuli Gurriel you have as well. I mean, like, they have dogs at every spot in the field, and obviously Carlos Correa is a huge piece to lose, but I mean, you kind of knew you were going to get this. The contract negotiations weren't too pretty throughout the entire year last year, and especially in the offseason that led him to going to Minnesota. But I think they were kind of preparing for this. It kind of reminds me of I mean, I like I've kind of how like the Dodgers traded for Trey Turner because they kind of knew in the back of their minds that they have a large chance that Corey Seager isn't re-signing. It kind of feels the same way that Houston was kind of having a plan B if Carlos Correa wasn't going to re-sign with them, and plan B is turning out really well for them to start the year. And a lot of games left, but when you have this kind of hot start at the beginning of the year, it could definitely speak volume to how you're going to progress heading into July and August and then into October.
Yeah, and they're right there. They're ready. This is a new era for the Houston Astros, I guess you could say. Carlos Correa left in a very big effect on the city of Houston. He brought a World Series. I'm not gonna say single-handedly, but he played a very vital role in that World Series championship team. It's gonna be you thought it was gonna be a tough hole to fill, but the Houston Astros, that just is a testament to their depth, their management, the guys that they're bringing in, who's getting it done. They know how to get it done when the guys are not always there. And I think that's just
Jeremy
another.
Pena.
There we
Jeremy
go.
Pena has done an excellent job, the rookie shortstop, who's probably the front runner for rookie of the year at the moment.
Yep.
I'm looking at the numbers now. He's like top 2 in every offensive category on this team. He's the second in home runs, tied for first in RBIs, second in stolen bases. He's up there for average. He's second in OPS. He's carrying a lot of this offensive load that Carlos Correa did last year as a rookie. And I mean, it speaks a lot to the confidence they had just throwing him in at short and saying, all right, it's your spot now, Jeremy, go get it. And, he's done his job so far, and he's done an excellent job over, 30 games that he's played so far. So, I mean, if he can keep it up at this level, I mean, not only will he fill the hole that Carlos Correa left, but, we might be talking about him in the same conversation as Carlos Correa in a few years.
Can I make one analogy? I'm
For
sorry.
sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know we were talking about hockey before, and this Jeremy Pena situation, Mary, you would understand this more. It kind of feels like Igor Shesterkin when he replaced Henrik Lundqvist, in a sense. It's like, how is he going to do when the lights shine brightest? And we haven't seen that yet of Jeremy Pena. So I don't want to say that like he's definitely filled that void completely, because it is a regular season. And I think we should really make this assessment in the playoffs, but it's definitely a nice compliment, similar to what it's like with the Rangers goaltending situation, with the Astros shortstop situation, that at least the hole is being filled immediately and not like a feeling out process over the course of these first 30 games.
Absolutely. And I mean, thus far through the games that he's played, he's shown under those bright lights. And we're going to talk about a team that is also under the bright lights, is always under the brightest of criticisms and the worst of criticisms. It's the New York Yankees, very similar to what we were discussing, the New York Rangers, who are fighting for their lives in the playoffs. There's their baseball team, who is, I'm not going to say fighting for their lives at all. They're making everything look easy. This is one of the teams that I think personally, if we're going to answer the question from earlier, this right here is the best team in baseball right now. You're looking at what these guys have been capable of doing in the hardest division of baseball. Nonetheless, they're fresh off a sweep over Toronto. Yeah, 2 games. I really don't understand what that means, but hey, it's a 2-game series. They got it done. Let's give full credit to them. Best 30-game start since 2003, and they've capped off by a 7-run, 8th inning over the White Sox, the team that we thought was going to be coming out chugging in the season. They have hit a bit of a drag, but they're slowly starting to get the wheels back in motion. They got their own set of problems down in the south side of Chicago, but this team, the New York Yankees that we're discussing, they've continued to flex. If you're looking at Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge have been carrying most of the workload, those actual literal muscles over all the MLB. And it is, I obviously since 2003, they haven't had a start like this, but they have come to play this year. And I want to ask you guys this question. Is this just a hot start for the Bronx Bombers? And I know we've discussed them so critically over the last couple of weeks. We had a full episode catered to the teams in New York, apparently, because they were the hottest teams in baseball, coincidentally. But I want to come back to this, probably baseball's most talked about franchise here, for the better and for the worse. Right now, they're reeling in the better. But is this the real Bronx Bombers? Is something truly different with this team? I compare them. I hate to bring back the hockey reference because, Mateo, I know you are not liking it, but you got a taste
He's
of
the
it
biggest hockey
yesterday.
I'm getting a taste of it. Yeah.
You got a taste of the Toronto Maple Leafs yesterday. I draw very similarities to the New York Yankees, a team that has to get it done in the playoffs. That's where all the attention is. The regular season means really nothing to this team unless they get it done where everybody wants them to get it done and where their payroll suggests that they can get it done. But is there something truly different with this team? Is there something different in their eye? Do they have that killer instinct where it's like, listen, we don't care what's in our way. We don't care when it is, what time of year, if it's hot, if it's cold, if the baseballs are right, if the baseballs are wrong, we're getting it done and we're going to step on the throat. What have you seen from this Yankees team aside from just a terrific start?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the 30-game start, best 30-game start since 2003. That obviously was the year where they lost in the playoffs to the Red Sox. They went up 3-0 on them, and then the Red Sox came back, won 4 straight and knocked them out. Every other time that the Yankees have gotten out to a start at least this good, they've won a championship. And, some of those championships are in the 50s, and some of them are, there's less teams in the league. They're, they constantly have a higher payroll, and they have like the best players in the league. Murderers Row got off to a couple of these starts and absolutely dominated the league and then the playoffs as well. But you talk about a team getting off to this start. I mean, the expectation for this Yankees team is always championship or bust. And you have this much success early in the season. If you don't win a championship, I don't know what these Yankees fans are going to do this year. But I mean, is this team built for success? My heart says no, because I don't like the Yankees and I want them to fail. And, I'm constantly praying on their downfall. But my mind kind of says yes. I mean, if the key to success is having a bullpen that can, come in when your starters aren't necessarily doing well, come in the 4th inning and mop up innings until all the way to the end of the game, the Yankees have the best bullpen in the game right now. The Yankees have some of the best offense in the game right now. And, we were talking about the Astros and how they were 10-8 against teams above 500. And, one of the constant critiques of this Yankees team right now is like, oh, they played the Orioles a couple times, and oh, they played the Red Sox a bunch, and the Red Sox are bad this year. And wait till they start playing real competition. They're 10-3 against teams above 500. They're 10-3 against teams above 500. They are winning against good teams as well as bad teams. And that makes the Yankees a very good team. They're built for the playoffs. They've got the bullpen, like I said. The offense has been favored by their park a little bit this year. I mean, Rizzo had that 3 home run game that was obviously assisted by Yankee Stadium. We've seen even against the Jays, a couple of those home runs that squeaked over the walls, or a couple of those hits that, went to that deep wall in left field that didn't get out. Just tough luck for some teams right now. But it's the same field that everybody's playing on. And, to that point, the Yankees are taking advantage of the chances when they get them. And they've got an unreal level of pitching this year that if they can keep it up, they're definitely the team to beat, because they fit the model of a championship team, which is something that we haven't been able to say about the Yankees for a very long time.
And I mean, listen, you're looking at all the dominant teams in the MLB right now. They all have every factor of their team firing. Like, their bullpen is always strong. And I got to give credit. The Yankees bullpen, what they've done this season is something to marvel at. I think it is considered the best bullpen as of right now in a lot of statistic categories. I don't have them pulled up right in front of me, but I've heard a lot of talk around these boys, and they're pulling their weight, and they're really backing up the starting pitching, which has also been in itself a blessing in disguise. They've got a lot of pieces churning. And Evan, I want to ask you this question. Does this team seem a little bit different than years past? Does it mean anything that they're dominating in May and April? And is it going to translate to something down the stretch of the season when the games get tougher, the games get more meaningful? And let's not forget here, a 4.5 game lead in the American League East, no matter what time it is during the year, is nothing to scoff at. These guys have poured it on when the guys have to. And I want to ask you, is this going to be enough come the postseason? I know I'm looking really far into the picture, but this is what it matters for this team. It's not about what they're getting done in April and May, those hot streaks and the guys contributing. It's about answering the bell when the bell is going to be getting rung the most, right? So what are your thoughts on the team?
Yeah, I mean, well, to Mateo's point, it's easy when you're playing in a little league ballpark. No, I mean, kidding, but I do I'm not trying to like joke, but I do think it is something important to touch a light on. We've seen so many home runs that the Yankees are hitting that if I don't know, it's like the park meter. I don't know what the stat category is called, but it's like you look at it and it would only be a home run like in this ballpark, and it's of course Yankee Stadium. So I'm not just going to sit here and act like there's been so many times where you think it's a fly ball, but then because of the low porch, it's a home run. Like that's kind of annoying, but at the same time, I can't scoff at the fact that they are winning and they're winning in comfortable fashion nonetheless. I mean, I've seen so many instances where they're winning by 3 or more runs, 2 or more runs. Like it isn't these 1-run games. I remember like they just played that series against Toronto. They won like 5-3 it was, or 5-2, something like that. Most recently that I was checking. But I mean, no, the team's really good. Anthony Rizzo leads the MLB in home runs. They have 3 of the top 5 home run leaders in the MLB. So, I mean, the fact that Rizzo is definitely stepping up. I know him and Gallo were kind of like obviously the two big mid-season acquisition pieces last year that started off hot, but kind of didn't really, get clicking, especially Joey Gallo. But I mean, you got to hope that they do something, man. When you have all of this talent on a roster, if you're not making it at least to the championship series with this roster for this year specifically, I would call it a failed season, because there's really no point in only getting to the playoffs and then losing in the division series. Like it's kind of just like a waste of 8 days. You might as well just gone on vacation earlier. But no, I definitely think they're built, and to the point of like this is their best start, and like they're always going to the World Series and winning. I mean, they're no joke. It's not like we're 15 games in and they're like 13-2. Like we're 31 games in and they're 23-8. So, definitely something to pay attention to. I just wanted to look at one. I believe they've played 18 of the 31 at home, which will definitely come, I feel like, to bite them just a tad bit down the road. Obviously playing at home, you're going to be a lot better home crowd, get the last at bat, but they're 14-4 at home. So they're definitely taking advantage of the opportunities. And, I could definitely see them making some noise. They definitely they're an interesting player that we weren't thinking about in the AL East.
And for the Jays fans listening, for the better, for the worse, unfortunately, we're gonna be keeping tabs on the New York Yankees as the season goes along. This is a team who's always kicking the can around. And listen, it's right now, as of May 13th, it is their division to lose. And I don't buy in too much on the home metrics where it's like, if you want to add something on the stadium side, Dale, please take a stab at it. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you want a reason to bet against the Yankees, it's their offense. I mean, they've been unreal this year. They're scoring a ridiculous amount of runs, but I don't know if you guys heard the other night against the White Sox and Dylan Cease. I think they put up 6 runs in 4 innings, but they struck out 11 times. So all but one of the outs across those 4 innings was a strikeout. And, obviously they hit a lot of home runs. They had, a ridiculous amount of offensive production. But if you're striking out 11 times in 12 at bats, 12 possible outs that you can make. If 11 of those are strikeouts, that's not sustainable. You're not going to score runs like that over the course of a season. And credit to the Yankees. They have a ton of great hitters on the roster. And, the home run isn't the only way that they can score runs. But if that's the way that they're going to be playing offense for the entire season, if that's the approach that they're all going to have on the plate, like I'm going to be the hero, I'm going to get the extra base hit, I'm going to do all this stuff, it'll work in a small sample size. It's not going to work over the course of the season, and that's not how it works in the playoffs either.
And I think it just speaks volumes too. It's not just boom or bust
That was
in the head. It's boom or bust on the field.
Oh yeah.
And listen, we've seen it come time and time again. And I know it's an up and down conversation here about the New York Yankees, but every year it's usually an up and down situation that they find themselves in. They're the Bronx Bombers for a reason, right? They're going to be striking out a ton. They've always done it. Their best players have always done it. I don't think this is going to change. And I don't think if it changes or not, it's going to dictate whether or not their season is going to be reaching expiration date in early October, mid-October. I don't think that really matters, but it's about catching fire when you absolutely need to. You could see this kind of play succeed in the postseason if it's more than adequate, and it is.
You got to get lucky.
Right time.
You got to get lucky.
They got to. I think the goal for the New York Yankees down the stretch, when games get much more meaningful, and again the teams are a lot harder to play against, and the division's a little bit more crammed up, where those games you have to actually get those wins and not throw away the gimme games, if you will. You have to learn that, yes, you can play that big juggernaut style where you're going to go for it all and you're going to strike out a bunch, but you also have to know when that's not working, you have to resort to a sort of small ball style of game, something they're not really used to. And I mean, Evan, I know how much you love to bring up the Dodgers, but they're a team that I found when they're always there, when they're always making their runs, it's not just relying on the long ball. I don't see the Dodgers strike out very often in the playoffs when in bunches. They're always there. They're going to get plays going. It's a lot of extra base hits, driving runs any way they can. Something that the Yankees have to kind of rub off of them as well.
Yeah, all those 2 out hits, or all those times they scored with like 2 runs too during that 2020 postseason. I think they had like 60 with 2, but I mean, I'm not looking too much into. I remember like my dad was like, "Yo, Evan, look at this," and it's Dylan Cease with 11 Ks through 4. I was like, "That is ridiculous." But has that like? It's just a question. Has it happened before yet? Because like, if this is a one-time thing, like, I'm not like overlooking it. Like it's kind of just like you have those. I mean, the Dodgers just lost 2 of 3 to the Pirates. I'm not really freaking out here, but if this is happening on more than one occasion throughout the year, then I'm like, oh, are we seeing the Bronx Bombers again of last year where they're solely relying on the long ball? Or like that was the whole issue, where it's like if they're not hitting home runs, they're only scoring 1 or none. But I don't know. I thought that was pretty funny that giving up 6 home runs but still able to strike out. Hopefully no one took the over strike or the under strikeouts for that game. That would have been brutal.
I mean, you look at the Yankees and their team strikeout rating so far, and I'm looking at it, they're, around middle of the road this year, it looks like, but they're in the same bunch as like Pittsburgh, Chicago, Detroit. They're striking out just as much as those teams. And, those teams are obviously much worse offensively. So the strength of this Yankees team right now is being carried by their power, because when they do make contact, they're getting the most, like they're maximizing it. So,
well, they are the Bronx one.
Yeah,
there we go. It's just their identity, and it's all up to rewriting it when the time matters. And I think this is going to be play that gets them to where you get that final test that you have to write, and it's going to be whether or not they can adapt to the situation. But you talk about offense, how vital it is in the New York Yankees system right now, and how it's all humming on all cylinders. I got to go on the complete opposite end of the spectrum here and take a look at an offense that is not just dead last in the majors, but it's looking like it needs life support right now. And interesting that we say this, because this team that I'm going to discuss, I'll give it away, the Arizona Diamondbacks. I know I alluded to this at the top of the show, but their offense, I was looking at some numbers today, churning some numbers here with this team, and they are batting 193 as a baseball team. That is here's the kicker though. They're batting 193 and they find themselves for the first time in a long time above 500 and treading water in the NL West. And that has to go with a lot towards how strong their pitching is this year. Not many people are looking at it. I don't blame you. A lot of people overlook not just the state of Arizona, but the sports teams that rely within it. The Arizona Diamondbacks pitching has been one of the best in the MLB. It has been, I believe, ranking 5th. The ERA plus, it is at 122, and it ranks 5th in the majors. Did you think the Arizona Diamondbacks were going to be there? Most definitely not. They're 17-15, like I mentioned. They started off the season 3-8. So over the last 3 weeks, they have really been getting the oven hot. And listen, I'm not going to come out here and give a bold statement. The Arizona Diamondbacks are legit. They're going to be contending. No, it is not their year. This is not a sustainable thing by any means. But the big question here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, the wheels are in motion. Very slow, very, very slow, but it is a very big push from where we expected them to see. And I could pull up all the preseason predictions that we've said, but we did not expect to see the Arizona Diamondbacks in this kind of position. Mateo, I'm going to ask you this before I jump to all the other stuff around this group. Listen, it's been a lot of luck. It's been a lot of people saying it's about time that we see this team from Arizona perform. Do you guys see this as the organization going to be putting some more trust into this team? Are the fans putting more trust into this team? Is there something that is to get behind with this Arizona Diamondbacks team? Mateo, I'll go with you.
Something that there's to get behind. I mean, winning always, inspires a little bit of confidence in your players. And, if you win for long enough, it puts a little bit of pressure on management to make that kind of move and to push you over to the next level. But, you're not going to win games with a 193 team batting average. I mean, the other number that you have here in our little rundown that we have here is that their ERA plus is 122, which means that their pitching rotation and their bullpen as well is 22% better than the rest of the average teams in the major leagues, which isn't going to hold. That's not going to stay the same. They're definitely going to plummet. But in terms of what is going right for this team, I don't know if it's necessarily what's going right, but I have a player that I think is definitely going to grow from this experience, and it's Dalton Varsho, their center fielder right now, who's had my eye on him a little bit last year. He didn't have a terrible year, but again, only played 55 at bats or something last year, like 200 at bats in 95 games sort of thing. And across 30 games this year, he's like a completely different hitter. He's hitting for power this year. He's got, 6 home runs already. He hit 11 last year, and he's the offensive leader of this team. So when you have a bad team that is overperforming, you get great performances from guys that are kind of breaking out of nowhere, right? And a guy like Dalton Varsho, who nobody was really like, oh my God, yeah, Dalton Varsho is my pick next year to go crazy. But, credit to him, he has, and he's carried a lot of this offensive load for a team that, the rest of the bats behind him have been floundering. So even if it's just one or two guys that, Varsho's a young guy, the Diamondbacks want him to be a part of this core. They want him to be a part of this team going forward. Even if it's just one or two guys in that offense or those pitchers that are having great seasons so far, that you can give that confidence, that you can say, hey, I can win at the major league level. I can be successful at the major league level, and I can be, a middle of the order hitter at a major league level and be on a team that is actually, not completely out of it. I think that says a lot to your players. I think that inspires a lot of confidence in them. And I think you'll see the effects of that in guys like Varsho over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years when the Diamondbacks are back in that window of contention again.
And how does it reflect more on the organization? Now, listen, they got management, they got guys who want to go out, and I don't know, do they want to go out and get guys? Because listen, the Arizona Diamondbacks, as much as we've been talking about them, they have not had any good results at all over the last, I'd say 4 or 5. You can go as long as you like. They have not had the results that many would have thought could happen with this franchise. But I think what you mentioned with Varsho, what you learn is that you've shown that we can develop a player and he can succeed. Like I think that's something that you can really run away with if you're the Arizona Diamondbacks organization. But could you speak a little bit more like towards what does the management have to take? What are the next steps? Is it something maybe like making trades at a deadline as extreme as that is? I know they're not going to be going all in, but maybe planning ahead for the future because you've seen that the pieces that are in place can work and that your system that you're sticking to is also going to suffice as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the differences we've seen with Arizona and the other teams that have sort of found themselves down and out over the last couple of years is that they've tried to retain talent. They extended Ketel Marte when everybody was calling for him to be traded to, a top AL East team, which is something that Oakland didn't do. They let their top players walk. It's something that Cincinnati didn't do. They let their top players walk. And, not so much Oakland, but Cincinnati's really feeling that, as we talked about last week, in the basement of the league because they essentially gave up. Arizona never gave up. They retained their talent. They re-signed their players. They're willing to spend, not a ridiculous amount of money, but a marginal amount of money to retain some kind of talent and not enter a full, complete rebuild, which I'm sure their fans respect. But it says a lot about how this management is committed to these young players, and they see value in making sure that young players can win because, as much as you want to maximize your potential and get as good of a draft pick as you can and shed as much salary as you can so you can spend more in the years that you're being successful, for a young team to win games, there's no experience that's better than that. There's no amount of, time in the minors that can make up for, you know, a winning stretch in the major leagues, because it's like I said, it's the confidence that you have in your players and, you know, the trust that it feels like the management puts in you by not giving up on you.
And when you tear something down as much as the Arizona Diamondbacks have in their tenure,
Mm-hmm.
as recently, trust is the one thing that it takes so much time compared to anything else to not just regain, but fully gain back from not only the players that have been there, but the players that are coming in. They need to have a trust between management and the players, and they're going to react accordingly. You see the great teams when the players are playing good and when they've seen something sustainable in the players, management comes in like they're supposed to do and drops I would say, a pleasant surprise that helps them move even forward. The winning gets more contagious now that the guy that's now on board wants to buy into the system, and that's what happens. That's where you get success from. So what we've seen from the Diamondbacks thus far is not only overachieving, but it's a step in the right direction. Evan, how much of a step has it been in the right direction for this team?
Yeah, I'm not really looking. I'm not trying to be a prisoner in the moment. I don't really see this as a step in the right direction. I kind of just see it as like every team we see throughout the year just has like 1 or 2 weeks where they're just absolutely hot. Everything's clicking. Mateo brought up the whole Quintel Marte thing. I'm still all for them trading him. I think they could get a decent haul in return for him. And I'm not looking at Varsho as like someone saying, "Oh, look, we developed one player." It's not like when you pull a rabbit out of a hat and say, "Look, I could do a magic trick." It's like you kind of need to have like a few years of like seeing how. I mean, you look at teams like the Tampa Bay Rays, for example, who are always finding themselves at the top of the MLB standings and then also the top of the farm system rankings. I mean, they're building for the future and they're also building for now. When you look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, they're always in the bottom echelon of both categories. And I definitely think it's something that they need to continue to work on. The fact that they're batting 193 is, I didn't even realize that given how much success that they've had over these past couple of weeks. But I definitely think they need to still work out a few things. I'm not looking to add new pieces into this team because I don't see I don't see how it makes sense for this team to add someone who can really, you know, be their leader. And I also don't think that any team out there is willing to trade their star to Arizona because I don't think the assets they would get in return would kind of equate. So I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction. I still think trade Ketel Marte, get the prospect haul you can get. You know, I definitely think they could get a decent amount. I would maybe not like a Matt Chapman thing, but maybe like a second tier below that because Ketel Marte is still an all-star second baseman who could slot in to any lineup and be effective right away. And there's also a need for second basemen for a lot of teams. It's very rare to find an elite level second baseman that can provide you offense and defense. So, uh, you know, it's great couple weeks, but I probably in a month from now they're gonna be, I don't know, what are they like 14, 15 or 17 now, something like that, or
17 and 15.
17 and 15. Like in a month from now they might be 15 and 30 for all we know. Like it's just the way that the Diamondbacks are playing right now, it's not sustainable at all.
And listen, you mentioned a lot about Ketel Marte, probably the lone straggler in that's that part of Arizona where, listen, there's not many pieces that they can trade off, but if anything, this is the one that can get you more value. But to Mateo's point, which I really love, was that out of the rebuilding teams, and you're going to look at them, I wouldn't say rebuilding, the teams that are in the basement of the league, all of them have admitted defeat. The Pirates don't want to go for it. Every time they bring in players, they still don't want to go for it. Cincinnati could have went for it, but tore everything down for reasons beyond me. We've discussed this thoroughly within this show. And you look at the Cubs where they've had to get off. It's just not their time. The time has come for a rebuild. And that's sort of the nature of the beast. But are you admitting defeat if you trade a guy like this?
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
I don't think you are. And I think the issue with the Diamondbacks is that they're kind of stuck here. Because let's be honest, like even if they made a huge trade to get even like 2 or 3 pieces, maybe for both the offense and the pitching, it's not going to be enough to win the division, let alone make the wild card. So they're kind of in that position that I think the Cincinnati Reds were in heading into the offseason this year. It's like we're not good enough to make the playoffs. But at the same time, it's like, we say this all the time, regardless of the sport. If you're going to suck, then just suck. Like, you don't want to be like mediocre where you're just at 500 and then it messes up your draft pick. And, you know, now that the MLB is going back to a lottery. I think you just want to have the highest percent chance of getting that number one pick. And like I'm saying, like even if the Diamondbacks make moves here and there, they probably won't be. They definitely won't be better than the Dodgers and the Giants. They probably won't be better than the Padres. And then you just look at the other teams in the National League, even with the extended playoffs, they're just in a stuck position. And I feel like if something just doesn't happen this year, I think there's a pull the trigger, Ketel Marte, because you can't ruin, you kind of have to respect the player at that point. And I kind of think that's what the Reds were doing this past offseason. I definitely think we could see that with the Diamondbacks next offseason.
When does the era of Diamondbacks baseball start? Like, when are we going to see the actual strides in the right direction? Because you said to yourself, it's not a big stride. It's maybe just a lucky series of events in quick succession. But Mateo, I'll ask you, when do we see a start in Arizona? Because listen, you're seeing the young guys that you mentioned sort of bloom, and Ketel Marte is still there. That shows that you can do it while he's there. You don't got to whip him to any team you want to get that big haul. But does the rebuild and everything success afterwards start when you get rid of him and get the prospects and all that back? When do you see it starting in Arizona? Because this is the most promising sign we've had to hang on to in quite some time.
Yeah, as much props as I just gave management for, not giving up on your players and sticking with your team and all that stuff. Part of developing a good team that can consistently win games and isn't just a flash in the pan is the fact that you have to draft well. And that's not something that Arizona has done well over the course of, the last decade. As long as I've been alive, I don't think I ever remember Arizona drafting well. But yeah, that's kind of the big hang up right now, is the fact that competitive teams and perennial teams that are back into contention, like, you look at a team that's taken a similar path where they were in the basement of the league and are now, building a dynasty. It's the Houston Astros. And, they drafted well and they did everything the way you were supposed to do. They let their players rise through the ranks. There were no expectations on them in the minor leagues, and they came up, they all won together in the minors. And now they're winning at the major league level. And it's the same formula that the Jays tried to follow, and the same thing that the Yankees tried to do with their homegrown talent. And every successful team, the Tampa Bay Rays have done the exact same thing. The Diamondbacks are not that. And the way their management operates right now, they will never be that. So you kind of have to build a little differently. I mean, if you want to accelerate that timeline, you got to hold on to guys like Marte, and you got to hold on to the guys that are having success at the major league level and right now. And you have to draft college level arms. You have to draft college age pitching players that are going to be able to compete in 1 or 2 years, like we've seen with, Reed Demeter the other day, who threw a no-hitter, and, guys like Garrett Crochet, who's now out with, the injury. But those are guys who spent, a year in the minors, 2 years in the minors, maybe at most, and then came up because they were already, 23 years old when they got drafted, 22 years old when they got drafted. So if you want to accelerate that process, and you're not going to be able to commit to a proper rebuild or the formulaic rebuild that we've seen really good teams undergo, you got to draft older players. And, if they do that and they hit on those picks, you could see this team being good in, maybe as soon as 3 years from now.
I think all the roads really back to what we've been discussing. Every angle that we've been all pointing out is about trust.
Mm-hmm.
The Arizona Diamondbacks don't have that yet. And they're slowly, I think they want it, obviously, as a team. You look at the greatest teams that we've seen, trust is all over the place. You got trust in your players, your offense, your defense, not just the things on the field, but the intangibles as well. You have trust that they're able to get it done. You have trust that their identity is substantial enough to put them over a hump, every other hump that comes their way. And I think the Diamondbacks have to just trust their process, trust that you need to draft well to get to where you want to go. The reason why big guys get traded or big pieces get traded is because your team didn't draft well and you're scavenging for whatever pieces you can get back.
And to that point, winning soon doesn't necessarily mean you've had the most successful rebuild. I mean, if you go for younger talent that you think has higher potential and you give them the time to develop in the minors, and you take all those steps that good teams take to develop players, you'll reap the benefits in the long run, but it'll be, 5-7 years before you're competitive again. So that's just a conversation that, I'm sure is happening on a daily basis in the Diamondbacks front office. And it's just a question of, what are you, who is your identity as a team, and what are you going to do going forward? And, how motivated are you by long-term success, or do you just want the revenues of a quick playoff run?
Right. And I think these are all the answers. Not that we're going to just see throughout the regular season, but as the off season looms, and the draft, all those big stages in a rebuilding team that mean more than many other teams. You may argue, but alas, that's the Arizona Diamondbacks, always in a weird spot. But this time around, at least for their fan base, just enjoy the little ride that you got. You got some decent success right now. I know it's not going to be here for a while, but get it while it's hot, as they say, right? So credit for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I wish them the best of luck because they've been stuck in the basement for quite some time. And a guy who's been stuck in the basement of his batting order, stuck in the basement of his, I guess, his career lows. You got a guy here, Trevor Story. Now, the Boston Red Sox have had an underwhelming season, to say the least. They are dead last in the American League East after a terrific season that saw them go, I think, one win away from advancing to the World Series, or they were extremely close. I don't have it in front of me or anything, but they were there and they were competitive and they were a legit baseball team. But I don't know, guys, is this a horror story? Or is this a detective narrative for surrounding the 29-year-old middle infielder? Listen, if you guys do not know, I'll give the context as needed. He's slashing 206 with a 304 slugging percentage and just 8 extra base hits. The biggest one of them all came yesterday for the first time, snapping a 26-game drought. He has his home run for the Boston Red Sox. The Boo Birds have been coming down on him at Fenway.
Monkey off the back.
He's been dumped all the way down the lineup. I think he started up at the top 1 or 2 around there, and he is just very, very quickly fell from grace. So he is looking like it's a non-option right now. He needs to turn it around. Is this home run going to be enough to turn around? That's the big question on all Boston media's mind surrounding this Red Sox team, a underperforming Sox team to say the least. But Mateo, give it to me. Is this a horror story or a detective narrative? Are you questioning what is going on with Story, or is this just a freak show and we don't know what to really work here? It's just getting worse and worse and worse as the days roll by.
I'm not hitting the panic button on Trevor Story just yet. I'm dangerously close to hitting the panic button on Trevor Story, but I'm not hitting the panic button on Trevor Story just yet.
His name.
Trey, yeah, I was thinking Trey Turner and Trey Story, Trey Turner, blah, 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 tongue tied. Anyway, one of the things that you look for, again, we talked about it already at the beginning of this episode. I think it was Mario that mentioned it, about how baseball is such a difficult sport to predict early in the season. You know, you could be a month, 2 months into the season and still have no idea that this team is going to be an incredible team and they're going to go on this great run in, through September and October, and they're going to, win the World Series out of nowhere, right? We've seen it a million times where wild card teams just, get hot starts in the last, month of the season, and they take that momentum all the way through the playoffs into the World Series. But one of the things about baseball is it's really difficult to predict how the rest of a player's season is going to go early on in the season. And the magic number that people like to wait for is 100 at bats. They say after 100 at bats, the hitter's kind of, got his timing down. They got his, his swing down on him, or if it's a pitcher, finally has a feel for the ball, a feel for the mound kind of thing. 100 at bats is kind of that magic number after spring training where you kind of lock in. And this year now in your mid-season form or whatever it is. Trevor Story home run that he hit the other day, or I guess the only home run that he's hit this season, came in at bat number 98. So, I mean, I don't want to call it a sign or anything, but this also could be Trevor Story, or the beginnings of Trevor Story breaking out of this, slump that has mired him for the first month of the season. And, we've seen it proven time and time and again that players, they're like two completely different players after their first 100 at bats. And, that's sort of how you get a lot of these seasons that are like, this guy has a great season, he wins a Silver Slugger, and you're like, how wasn't he an all-star? It's because he was really bad for his first 100 at bats, and everybody forgets about it when he goes on the tear that he goes on. And, they didn't play yesterday. I'm sure Trevor Story is going to be in the lineup today because, you take a swing like that, you got the feel in your bat. You don't want to take a day off after that. So I'm going to be following Trevor Story very closely over the next couple of weeks, because this is he's at that threshold. He's 102 right now after that last game. This is the threshold where we're going to see what kind of season Trevor Story is going to have. And, if that home run was a sign that he's breaking out of it, then, it sticks to the trend. And if he takes a little bit more time, I think Trevor Story is too talented of a player to give up on. I mean, we've seen the success that he's had in Colorado. I mean, not necessarily to the end of his stretch there, but Trevor Story is too talented of a player to be hitting 206, especially in a park like Fenway where, you've got the short wall and everything. I'm I'm not ready to give up on Trevor Story, and I do think that home run was him breaking out of it just because of the timing and everything and the way it all lined up.
And you
As Evan
mentioned
disappears.
yeah, as he disappears into the bowels of his room, I think now he's yep, he's all right. I don't really want to know what Evan is doing, but
Yep.
There we go, he's coming back. But
I am so hot right now.
Yeah, he's here. But
All
Mateo,
right,
you were talking about ballparks. Now he played at Coors Field. He's playing at Fenway too, although similar in some distances. The left field wall is very short, and Trevor Story is supposed to be supposedly taking advantage of said wall. But you look at the two ballparks, and I'm going to look at the two cities. Playing in Colorado with absolutely no attention, nobody's on your back about really anything, and the expectations are extremely low. You come into Boston. Boston is a very passionate baseball city. They love their Red Sox, a historic franchise. They've had their successes. They've been close to their successes, and recently it has been just like that. The Boo Birds come down. I always get the Boo Birds for when it comes to baseball, the Yankees. For the hockey, it's the Leafs. For baseball, it could also be the Boston Red Sox, and Trevor Story's been getting an abundance of that. How big, Mateo, do you think the media coverage and the change in it's a full lifestyle change from Colorado to Boston? Do you think that plays in a role in an athlete's head like Trevor Story? Because listen, he has never struggled to this caliber. And I mean, you mentioned the at bats. 98 at bats is I didn't know heading in, but that is a remarkable number that you're struggling for. So how much of a impact does the city play in this situation? The role of Boston compared to Coors, compared to Colorado, like the media coverage is totally different.
He's never played in a market like this. And, that's definitely a factor that you've got to consider. I mean, if you consider the fact that he was going to go to the Yankees, everybody was saying, Trevor Story is going to sign with the Yankees. Like that's obviously one of the worst markets to be in as a struggling player. And, he had to have been at least a little bit mentally prepared for it just because of the teams he was being linked to in the offseason. And, he knows what's associated with those kind of teams. And, Boston did kind of come out of nowhere to pick him up, but it is a market that's, can be just as bad, if not sometimes worse than the New York market to their struggling players. And, guys like Stanton and stuff have, coming from Miami, which also isn't a huge market. When he came to New York, he was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like they expect me to be on every single at bat in a sport where, a great hitter fails 70% of the time. And, Story's failing a little more than 70% of his time, but he's not necessarily having the absolute worst start to the season that we've ever seen. 206 is bad, but it definitely gets a lot worse than that. For a guy like Trevor Story, though, it's the media is definitely a factor on him, especially when it's your first season in a city. It's not like you came over at the trade deadline or whatever, and you've got a little bit of your numbers don't look so bad on the scoreboard because you were, raking home runs in Colorado and you came to Boston and you fell in a slump when you got in there. Now you were starting at 0-0-0 and everybody in the stands was watching those numbers change every day. And, you're having to hear it on the sports channels every single day, and they can be brutal to the guys on NESN as well. So, for Trevor Story, it's a lot more difficult of a situation when you're starting a season having this kind of a slump as opposed to sort of coming, in the middle of a season or just fresh after a trade. It's unfortunate timing, but he must have known what he was getting into. And, I have no doubt that he's going to come out on the other end of it. Just a matter of getting used to it, I think.
And I mean, it's a city that's going to eat you up and spit you out, right? It's Boston, whether it's any sport, they are very tough on their players. Their fans are very passionate and they just love success. Once they've had it, and they've had it for quite some time, they never want to give it back or give it away. And Trevor Story's just hearing that side of things. And a guy who will eat you up and spit you out, I'm going to turn to him right now, Evan Davis. This guy brought the this guy brought the conversation to my attention here of Trevor Story. Now we all know he was struggling, but Evan Davis put it into perspective of the overrated conversation. I'd love to hear where this avenue takes us, Mr. Davis, Cali's finest.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm definitely just looking at last season as well. I'm not only like looking at this one season that he's had with the Red Sox, but the expectations going into it, you sign a contract worth $20+ million. You're not expected to make the team worse. Now the Red Sox are on pace for 100 losses. I'm sure after the signing, their fans were hoping they'd be on pace for 100 wins. But I remember last year, Trevor Story was obviously hot in the market because he didn't want to re-sign with Colorado. But I think the one alarming thing that I don't know if people are really paying attention to is that teams also weren't willing to trade for him. Like they were willing to take the risk that, oh, maybe we could try to figure out a way to get him in free agency. But I think the one thing is that they didn't want to give anything up for him, which I thought was really weird at the time. But then when you were looking at it, like after the All-Star break last year too, he was absolutely horrendous. And that's why teams didn't want to trade for him, because they were afraid that they would have to give up a lot for not really getting a lot in return. And the whole thing was like, could Trevor Story really turn around a franchise for you? And just being in such an uber competitive shortstop market with Correa and Seager, and also having just Marcus Simeon in there as well, like it was hard for him. But I just thought that was very alarming. And I think, I don't know if this is true or not, but guys, there's a lot of benefits to playing at Coors Field
Oh,
half of the
absolutely.
season. I mean, the elevation is huge. There's so many times where you think there's a pop-up and it's going 430 feet. I mean, and now you're in Boston where obviously the media plays a huge factor, but it's not like Trevor Story was a bum before this. I mean, he was an all-star. He's constantly within the MVP voting marks. And the fact that he's now hitting 206 and then a 304 slugging percentage. And I think the one issue too, in 26 games, he's struck out 37 times. I mean, I think that's just a little alarming considering that you're paying this guy to try to win you a ball game. And right now, I don't know, like I'm kind of getting like Javi Baez vibes where it's like he's great and obviously you want him on your team, but the one issue is that he just strikes out way too much. And I'm looking at his statistics, and granted, this is at the beginning of his career, but he was having a year where he almost struck out 200 times in a season, and then after that, 170 times. I mean, I don't know. It's almost just seeming like, is it really worth it? And the fact that he's now with you for 5 more years after this, paying upwards of almost $25 million, like I don't know. It kind of just makes you think as to what's going to happen, because right now they're worse than the Baltimore Orioles. I don't even know who this number one pitcher of the Orioles is. Is Cedric Mullins still in the ML? Like, I don't
The
know who's
pitcher
on.
is probably John Means still.
I mean,
Yeah,
good for
but
him. I mean,
yeah.
he's probably working at Metro right now trying to make extra money. I don't know who they are.
I will say though, Evan, one thing that you did say that I think is a little bit relevant to this conversation. You dropped Marcus Semion's name, and he's a guy,
He's been
very,
horrendous too.
very similar story to Trevor's story, and not so much talking about this year, more so talking about last year and the start that he got off to, just because as a Jays fan, watched it firsthand. Semien really struggled for the first month of last season. He couldn't hit a ball to the opposite field. They were constantly shifting him, and he was just beating balls into the ground or, hitting shallow pop-ups to the third baseman. And it's a really similar situation in which you take a guy who's been a shortstop for his entire life. Trevor Story, they wanted him to play shortstop so badly, they shipped Tulo out of Colorado so he could come in there and play short. Trevor Story is a guy who's got to pick it up like Semien and learn an entirely new position in an entirely new market on an entirely new team, entirely new environment, new teammates, all that sort of thing to worry about. I'm saying entirely a lot because it's a lot. But that's a lot for a player to have to deal with. And, as much as we say like, second base is, not as difficult as a position of shortstop, it's still a difficult position.
Mhm.
And it's still a position that you have to be able to play effectively at the major league level. And I know, just from my experience in baseball, obviously never played at a remotely professional level, but second base, there's a lot that you don't know until you play the position, about the footwork, about the positioning, all that sort of stuff that goes in. Now with the shifts, there's even more that you have to be, mentally prepared for. And it's a different look to the game. And so my question is, if it was that big of a factor for Semien, and we saw when he started to get comfortable at second base, that's when he started to break out with the bat. Is it just a comfort thing? Is it the fact that Trevor Story has to go out there every day and play 9 innings at a position that he's not comfortable with? And that's what's getting his focus right now. And once he figures out second base, and once he finally locks in and feels comfortable there, is his bat going to come around?
And I think that's what the silver lining is for Trevor Story. He's probably looking at all these guys around him who've had similar paths to where they find themselves now, and is saying, listen, it'll get better. It'll get better. It'll get better. But as you say that, and as it gets worse, you kind of question if it is going to get better, if it is. And that's just the natural human thing. If it's not getting better when you're thinking it's going to get better, you don't really know what to think at that point. And once you're thinking in baseball, you're not playing baseball. I know baseball is a huge mental game, but it's a huge mental game for the right reasons when you're thinking, not for those kind of pessimistic values that when you're in a slump, it's just how you roll. Now, I used to play second base. I'm a second baseman when I play, and it is a totally different feel. I had the vice versa from Trevor Story. I switched to shortstop a couple times, and it's a totally different look from the baseball field. You're seeing a ball totally differently. You're reading the ball off the bat in a different manner, and the footwork is so unique. And listen, I didn't get to play in a different stadium. I never even played in a stadium. I played on a little small baseball field. He's playing in a stadium with much more fans, much more passionate fans, and a totally different set of scenery and in a totally different set of teammates. Everything has changed. So it's all up to maybe just a slow adapter. This is the first time he's moved somewhere in his career. It's the first time he's moved positions in his career. And this is the first time he's faced real adversity, moving down a lineup with a little bit more pressure and a little bit more values in a system for the first time in his career. So it's a lot of years of firsts for this guy. And you're hoping from that first home run that he got last game, if it's going to go into his legs and say, listen, there is results. If we stay on task, if we keep going, we're going to finally get it. We're going to break through. And that's what we want to see from Trevor Story going forward. And I think the Boston Red Sox are in the same boat. An underperforming season thus far, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's so easy to turn it around. You shouldn't be behind the Baltimore Orioles, like you mentioned, Evan, but that's baseball, man. It happens at random. So Boston's going to have some higher expectations going forward. I'm sure Trevor Story is. He's got the heat in his bat right now. And I've been there. Slumps are not fun. And slumps like that are over that amount of time. I don't think I get 100 at bats in a season, to be quite honest with you, just because of how short they've been getting cut recently. Yeah. But he's got 100 at bats. He has a feel. He knows what now has gone wrong for him for quite a while. Now he's got to find what goes right for him. And hey, that could lead his way, maybe not as an all-star, but a breakout player and who's leading Boston Red Sox to a decently talented promised land. So it's all up in the air with Trevor Story. It's all up in the air with the Boston Red Sox, but we'll have to reintervene when we get there and when he's getting a little bit more hotter because he is a talented player. He signed that contract for a reason. Boston get to see it, and I think they're going to get a taste of it, whether they like it or not, throughout the year. There's just too much talent within Trevor Story because that's usually how talented players, their stories go. If you want me to add that little pun to end it.
There you go.
We'll stop it right there. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to episode 16 of Breaking News Bears. It's been a terrific conversation. Teams that are on the high end of the spectrum and the high plethora of the MLB, and guys who are stuck in the middle and near the bottom, but are trying to work their way up. Guys, individually, teams as a whole, we talk about it all on Breaking News Bears. But thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully the Leafs make me in a little bit more better spirits. I'm surprised my voice actually held up, but hey, here we are. We are passionate. The passion is here, and baseball is, I'd say now in full swing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It is, you're seeing what other teams have to offer. It's a fun time. It's been a fun week, nonetheless, for baseball fans across the world. But I am Mario Russo, Matteo Ruiz to my left, Evan Davis below me, signing off from episode 16 of Breaking News Bears. We will see you next week with a new string of baseball to talk about.